Pakistan's challenges. The country is facing numerous growing challenges, including population growth, weak governance, and a sense of political and economic instability. Dysfunctional institutions. Civilian institutions are largely ineffective, contributing to public pessimism and demoralization. The state's capacity to maintain order is diminishing, with insurgencies and outlaws rising in various regions. Weak rule of law. The judiciary's ability to enforce justice has weakened, undermining the rule of law and affecting governance. Political control by establishment. Despite the constitutional framework, the establishment holds significant power over state institutions, leaving the civilian setup lacking legitimacy. Public discontent. Actions against opposition leaders, like Imran Khan, have further distanced the public from the state, especially in regions like Balochistan, where alienation is growing. Need for legitimacy. Effective governance requires both legal and moral legitimacy, which is currently lacking. Popular participation is crucial, particularly in addressing insurgencies and terrorism. Constitutional challenges. Efforts to manipulate the Constitution, like proposed amendments to undermine judicial independence, could lead to a standoff between state institutions. Path forward. The author advocates for collaboration between stakeholders and free, transparent elections to restore legitimacy and improve governance. Crux, simplified explanation. Pakistan is going through a very tough time, with many problems growing worse. The population is increasing, but the state cannot provide enough opportunities, and government institutions are failing to function properly. Insurgencies and lawlessness are rising, and the judicial system is too weak to maintain the rule of law. The military establishment controls much of the political system, leading to a loss of trust in the government and public institutions. The article suggests that for Pakistan to move forward, it must ensure free elections and greater legitimacy for civilian institutions. Collaboration, not confrontation, is necessary to address these challenges. U.S.-China tensions. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to Beijing signals efforts to reduce tensions between the U.S. and China ahead of the U.S. presidential election. Strategic discussions. Talks covered divisive issues like Taiwan, trade, technology, military postures, and China's support for Russia, but with some positive outcomes on narcotics control and military dialogue. Chinese interests. China aims to stabilize relations before the next U.S. president takes office, showing concern over how either candidate will approach Beijing. U.S. bipartisan consensus on China. Both Trump and Harris view China as a strategic adversary, and neither is expected to soften U.S. policies, including trade and military issues. Trump's approach. Known for unpredictability, Trump is likely to continue a tough stance on trade with China, though he has expressed respect for President Xi and could take a pragmatic approach in negotiations. Harris's approach. As Biden's former vice president, Harris is expected to maintain the current administration's strong stance on China, including trade tariffs and military support for Taiwan. Future uncertainty. Regardless of who wins the U.S. election, tensions with China are likely to remain, but both candidates will likely try to avoid direct conflict. Crux, simplified explanation. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to China shows an attempt by both countries to ease tensions before the U.S. elections. The discussions focused on key conflicts like Taiwan, trade, and China's support for Russia, with small agreements on other issues. Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are expected to maintain tough stances on China if elected, reflecting a broader U.S. policy of containment, but will likely try to avoid escalating tensions into a direct conflict. The future of U.S.-China relations depends heavily on how the next U.S. administration chooses to navigate these challenges. India's support for Hasina Wajid. For 15 years, India has supported the autocratic rule of Hasina Wajid and her Awami League in Bangladesh, benefiting from a strategic alliance that helped maintain control over India's northeastern states and protect its investments. Hasina's fall. Student-led protests forced Hasina to flee to India, straining relations between the two countries. Her continued public statements from India have further complicated matters, with Bangladesh's interim government demanding her extradition. Resentment in Bangladesh. Bangladeshis view India as having propped up Hasina's oppressive regime, leading to growing anti-India sentiment, which predated Hasina's downfall. Indian media and politics. Indian media and social media portrayed the protests in Bangladesh as an Islamist uprising, fueling further resentment. India's use of religious nationalism has also contributed to deteriorating relations with Bangladesh. Regional discontent. Other smaller South Asian states like the Maldives and Nepal have also grown discontent with India's influence, seeking more independent foreign policies. Crux, simplified explanation. India placed heavy reliance on Hasina Wajid's leadership in Bangladesh for 15 years, but her recent ousting has backfired, leading to strained relations. Bangladeshis are frustrated with India's long support of an oppressive regime, and anti-India sentiments are growing. This situation is further aggravated by India's use of religious nationalism and inflammatory media coverage, damaging its influence in the region. Other neighboring countries like the Maldives and Nepal are also seeking more independence from India's dominance. India must recognize that such internal political strategies do not make for effective foreign policy. Outdated bureaucratic system. Pakistan's bureaucracy is a relic of the British colonial era, with procedures and structures largely unchanged for over a century. This system emphasizes formality over substance. Flawed recruitment and training. Bureaucrats are selected through exams that test rote learning and mastery of rigid, outdated English. Training focuses on creating a sense of authority and distinction from the public, rather than preparing bureaucrats for effective public service. Generalists in specialized roles. Bureaucrats are generalists, often rotating between diverse sectors without developing expertise in any one area. This contributes to inconsistent policies and decision-making. Elite governance structure. Bureaucrats are more accountable to their superiors and political elites than to the public, perpetuating a governance system that benefits the elite at the expense of ordinary citizens. Lack of institutional knowledge, frequent rotation of bureaucrats, and lack of continuity lead to poor institutional memory and repeated mistakes, hindering effective governance. Oversimplified critique of corruption. Focusing solely on the integrity of individuals in power misses the larger issue of systemic design flaws in the bureaucratic framework. Crux, simplified explanation. Pakistan's bureaucracy is stuck in outdated colonial practices, with recruitment, training, and job roles emphasizing form over substance. Bureaucrats are generalists who rotate through various positions without developing expertise, leading to inconsistent policies and poor decision-making. The governance structure benefits the elite, as bureaucrats are accountable to their superiors rather than the public. The real issue lies not just in corruption, but in the fundamental design flaws of the system. Superficial austerity measures. The Shehbaz Sharif government, like its predecessors, has announced cosmetic austerity measures, such as bans on car purchases and foreign trips. These are seen as publicity stunts with little real impact on reducing government expenditures. Job reductions and outsourcing. The government plans to abolish 150,000 jobs and outsource handyman services as part of an effort to downsize the federal government. However, without significant reforms, especially cutting perks for higher bureaucracy, these actions are unlikely to make a substantial difference. Debt servicing dominates budget. With over half of the federal budget going towards debt servicing, the government's failure to reduce wasteful spending exacerbates the fiscal deficit, increasing reliance on borrowing. Rising public debt. Pakistan's public debt continues to climb, with domestic debt increasing by $537 billion in July 2024, undermining the government's austerity claims. Need for real austerity reforms. The article emphasizes that real austerity involves making difficult choices, and there is no indication that the government is ready to implement serious long-term reforms. Crux, simplified explanation. The Shehbaz Sharif government's austerity measures, like those of past administrations, are largely superficial and do little to tackle the country's growing financial crisis. While the government has announced job cuts and outsourcing, without deeper reforms to reduce perks for higher officials and wasteful spending, these efforts will be ineffective. Pakistan's debt continues to rise, highlighting the need for real austerity measures that the government has yet to embrace. Severe plastic pollution in South Asia. Plastic pollution is a significant environmental issue in South Asia, driven by rapid urbanization, industrialization, and poor waste management. The World Bank's report, Waves of Plastics, highlights this growing crisis, particularly in the context of marine pollution. High plastic waste in packaging. Over 62% of plastic consumption in South Asia is tied to packaging, much of it single use, which ends up in rivers and oceans. This poses a threat to ecosystems and public health. Pakistan's plastic waste challenges. Although Pakistan has the lowest plastic leakage rate in the region, it faces challenges due to poor waste collection infrastructure and reliance on the informal sector, waste pickers and recyclers, which operates in an unregulated manner, limiting its effectiveness. Impact on the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. This region, the source of major rivers, is heavily polluted by plastics, which affect ecosystems and communities downstream. The pollution endangers biodiversity and the health and livelihoods of millions who rely on these rivers for water, agriculture, and fishing. Call for regional cooperation. Given the transboundary nature of plastic pollution, the report urges South Asian countries to cooperate regionally, setting aside political differences to address the shared environmental challenge. Effective waste management systems and regional collaboration are essential to protecting the health of ecosystems and populations in the region. Crux, simplified explanation. Plastic pollution is a growing environmental crisis in South Asia, especially affecting rivers and ecosystems. With the region's heavy reliance on single-use plastics, poor waste management, and informal recycling systems, countries like Pakistan face severe challenges. The report calls for regional cooperation among South Asian nations to address this problem collectively and protect both ecosystems and the millions of people who rely on them for survival. Hyder Ali's Paralympic success. Hyder Ali won a bronze medal in the discus throw, F37 category, at the Paris Paralympics, marking his fourth medal in 5 appearances. His achievements include medals in both long jump and discus throw across different Paralympics since 2008. Challenges overcome. Born with cerebral palsy, Hyder has had to overcome numerous obstacles, including the lack of financial support and facilities for athletes, especially para-athletes, in Pakistan. His determination has been the driving force behind his success. Lack of support in Pakistan. Despite his international success and being awarded a Pride of Performance in 2021, Hyder has faced limited support and struggled to train properly due to inadequate facilities and funding. National recognition. Hyder's accomplishments bring pride to Pakistan, ensuring the country remains on the medals table in international competitions like the Paralympics, but the lack of recognition and support for athletes like him highlights a larger issue of national neglect. Crux, simplified explanation. Hyder Ali, despite being born with cerebral palsy and facing minimal support from Pakistan, won his 4th Paralympic medal by earning bronze in the discus throw at the Paris Paralympics. His persistence and dedication are commendable, especially in a country where athletes, especially para-athletes, receive little financial or infrastructural backing. His accomplishments should be celebrated and better supported by the nation.